You know, if you open up social media right now and just like scroll for a few minutes, you are almost guaranteed to see it.
Oh, yeah, the algorithm loves it.
Right. It's that whole hashtag van life trend. It's usually this beautifully color graded video of someone who has, traded in their cramped, overpriced city apartment for this cozy wood paneled house on wheels.
Yeah, always with the fairy lights.
Exactly. They wake up, they push open the back doors of their van, and they're just looking out over this pristine ocean cliff or maybe a misty mountain valley. It looks entirely idyllic. I mean, it really looks like the ultimate modern version of freedom.
It really does.
But it also kind of makes you wonder about the practical reality behind the camera. Like, what happens when you zoom out from that one single van? What happens when an entire country with its own delicate infrastructure, its own laws, and its own local communities suddenly has to adapt to an absolute explosion of this nomadic living?
Well, it creates a massive structural shock to the system. I mean, we're no longer talking about just a few adventurous souls going off the grid with a surfboard and a sleeping bag.
Right. It's bigger than that now.
Much bigger. We are talking about a fundamental global shift in how millions of people want to experience travel. And honestly, in an increasing number of cases, how they want to live their lives entirely.
And that is exactly what we are digging into for today's deep dive. We are pulling from a really fascinating piece of academic research today. It is a chapter titled Rethinking Caravanism in Portugal, a Sustainable and Regenerative Approach.
Yes, and this comes to us from researchers at the ISCTE University Institute of Lisbon.
Right. And our mission today is to really look past those glossy Instagram filters. We want to figure out if caravanism, which encompasses motorhomes and camper vans, if it's just a fleeting travel fad fueled by algorithms, or if it represents a massive untapped economic engine that could literally regenerate struggling communities.
Because the researchers provide a highly detailed, very data-driven look at this specific phenomenon. They went out and actually interviewed experienced caravanists, pulling apart the economic and environmental realities of this trend to see what is actually happening on the ground.
Far beyond the social media aesthetic. Okay, let's unpack this. To really understand this caravanism boom, we first have to understand why Portugal is basically the perfect petri dish for this entire experiment.
Well, Portugal serves as an incredibly unique environment when it comes to global tourism. I mean, the source material highlights just how massive their footprint is on the world stage. They have been elected the best tourist destination in Europe multiple times.
Which is huge.
It is. And the financial impact of that title is staggering. In 2022 alone, tourism accounted for 15.8% of the national GDP.
Wow.
Yeah, that generated 21.1 billion euros in a single year.
But there is a serious catch to all that success, right? Because the data shows that 86.8% of those overnight stays happen directly on the coast.
Yes, almost all of it.
And the industry suffers from incredibly heavy seasonality. Like, it peaks astronomically in the summer and then just drops off a cliff in the winter. So why is that geographical and seasonal concentration such a massive problem?
Well, think about the strain that puts on a municipality. You have these coastal towns that might be absolute ghost towns in January.
Right.
So local businesses struggle to stay afloat, people lose seasonal jobs, and the local economy stagnates. But then by July, their infrastructure is just buckling under the weight of millions of visitors.
Like, they physically can't handle it.
Exactly. The local restaurants, the municipal water supply, the roads, they simply cannot handle that densely concentrated volume. Meanwhile, you look at the interior of the country, like the rural agricultural areas, and they are completely missing out on that 21.1 billion euro economic pie.
So they're getting none of the benefit while the coast takes all of the stress.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the proposed solution, which is the house on wheels.
Right. But we should probably define what we mean by caravanism first, because the terminology really matters for the economics here.
Sure, yeah.
We are talking specifically about motorhomes and highly equipped camper vans. This is not, throwing a sleeping bag in the back of a hatchback, and it's not pitching a nylon tent in the woods.
It's way more involved.
Yeah, it is an all-in-one solution. These vehicles have a kitchen, a bed, and crucially, bathroom facilities built right into them.
And the financial incentives for traveling this way are pretty wild. The research points out that for a 4-person travel group, utilizing a motorhome can save up to 64% compared to traditional vacations.
Which is incredible.
It's a huge margin, especially for families who are feeling the squeeze of inflation right now. But wait, let me push back on this for a second. Is this just glorified camping? I mean, it kind of sounds like putting a steering wheel on a turtle shell and calling it a revolution.
Yeah, that's a funny way to put it. But what's fascinating here is the legal and practical distinction between the two. Think about normal camping. You are literally tied to the ground.
Right, like tent pegs and all that.
Exactly. You have to hammer in tent pegs, roll out an awning, plug a cord into an external electricity grid, and hook a hose up to a water pipe. You are totally immobilized.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Modern caravanism, however, is defined by high autonomy and total mobility. You carry all your resources with you in self-contained tanks and batteries.
So you aren't tied down to a designated rented plot of land.
No, you don't actually need a traditional campsite to survive. You just need an occasional service area, like a place to safely dump your waste tanks and refill your fresh water.
Yeah.
Then you just turn the key and keep moving.
And that autonomy completely rewrites the geographic footprint of the tourist. They don't have to stay where the big hotels are.
Precisely.
Because it changes how people travel so fundamentally, it changes the value they bring to the destination. And to measure exactly how valuable this trend is, the researchers applied a hardcore business evaluation tool called the VRIO framework.
Right? VRIO. It's an acronym used in strategic management. It evaluates four things: value, rarity, inimitability, meaning how hard it is to copy, and organization.
Usually you'd apply this to a corporation, right? Like to see if they have a sustainable competitive advantage over their rivals.
Exactly. But here, the researchers applied it to the activity of caravanism itself. They wanted to see if this trend gives Portugal a competitive advantage in the highly saturated global tourism market.
So they went out and interviewed 18 highly experienced caravanists in Portugal, kind of running them through this stress test to see if the hype matches the reality. And the findings on the value front were completely unanimous.
Yeah, a full 100% of the interviewees agreed that caravanism provides unique value to the country.
Because it directly addresses that massive coastal congestion problem we mentioned earlier. Since these travelers are autonomous, their natural behavior just naturally drives them away from crowded hotspots and pushes them deep into the countryside.
And that mechanism is vital. Because instead of a family spending all their vacation money exclusively at some massive resort on the Algarve coast in July, a caravanist might buy their weekly groceries at a tiny village market in the interior in, say, November.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. They might eat at a family-run tavern that rarely even sees international tourists. So it actively pumps tourist dollars into local businesses year-round, which directly combats both the coastal crowding and that intense seasonal drop-off.
So it brings clear value, but I mean, a regular tourist renting a car and driving to a bed and breakfast in the country also brings value. What makes a van so uniquely rare?
Well, again, 100% of the people interviewed agreed this is a rare resource.
100%.
Yep. It offers this intense feeling of self-sufficiency. It's a lifestyle that a traditional brick-and-mortar hotel simply cannot offer you. I mean, you can't wake up in a hotel, decide you don't like the weather, and drive your hotel room to the next town.
No, definitely not.
The researchers actually used text mining tools to analyze the interview transcripts, looking for the underlying emotional drivers. And the concepts that totally dominated the conversations were freedom, nature, and flexibility.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that specific combination, having extreme, unplannable mobility while still retaining the familiar comfort of a home environment, it's remarkably rare in the travel sector. You are always sleeping in your own bed with your own pillows, but the view out the window can change every single day.
Which makes it incredibly difficult for other forms of tourism to replicate. In fact, according to the study, 88.9% agreed it is inimitable because you can change your itinerary on an absolute whim without losing a deposit on a hotel room or missing a scheduled train.
Right.
But let me challenge that premise for a second. What about overlanding? You know, you see these heavily modified 4x4 vehicles, the ones with the massive tires, taking off into the wilderness. Isn't taking a Jeep with a roof tent into the mountains basically the exact same thing as a motorhome, just with better suspension?
Well, it seems similar on the surface, but the researchers make a very clear demographic and practical distinction here. Overlanding is primarily focused on the journey through rough, unpaved terrain. The entire point is the vehicle's capability to navigate difficult topography.
Okay.
And while it does involve sleeping outside, usually in roof tents or ground tents, it severely lacks the home-like comfort that makes caravanism so appealing to the masses.
Ah, I see the difference. Like, my 7-year-old parents might not want to climb a cold metal ladder into a wet roof tent in the freezing rain after off-roading all day,
Exactly.
but they would happily sleep in a heated motorhome bed with a functioning toilet nearby.
That is the defining factor. Overlanding is essentially a niche adventure sport for a specific demographic. Caravanism, on the other hand, is highly accessible. It works for families traveling with toddlers, it works for retirees with mobility considerations, and it works for remote workers who need a comfortable desk setup.
Mm.
That broad demographic appeal, permanently fused with the comfort of a mobile house, is what makes it so hard for traditional travel industries to imitate.
Okay, so if caravanism brings immense value to rural areas, if the feeling of freedom is rare, and if that comfort mobility combo is highly inimitable, it should be the ultimate golden goose for Portugal. Like, it should be solving their seasonal and geographic tourism problems perfectly.
It should.
But here's where it gets really interesting. To capture all that value, a system actually has to be organized. And this is where the entire phenomenon crashes headfirst into a brick wall.
Yeah, the lack of organization is the breaking point of the entire system. According to the research, 77.8% of the interviewees explicitly stated that Portugal is simply not organized to handle this boom.
Wow, almost 80%.
Yeah. The country has the natural beauty, sure, but they completely lack the structural framework to support the people coming to see it.
And the numbers really paint a stark picture of how unprepared the infrastructure is. The source notes that Portugal only has about 10,000 registered motorhomes locally.
Which isn't a lot.
No, especially if you compare that to a country like Germany, which has over 589,000, or France, which has over 524,000. I mean, the gap is just massive. Because historically, there just hasn't been a massive domestic market for this lifestyle in Portugal. They never built the facilities for it.
Right.
So when hundreds of thousands of foreign vans started crossing the border, seeking out the warm winters, the country was caught totally flat-footed.
And when we talk about lacking facilities, we are primarily talking about something called ASAs. That's Áreas de Serviço para Autocaravanas.
Okay.
These are dedicated municipal service areas. And they are essential because they provide a place where motorhomes can legally park and safely dispose of their black water, which is raw sewage from the toilets, and their gray water, which is the soapy runoff from sinks and showers.
Gross, but necessary.
Very necessary.
Yeah.
They also allow travelers to refill their freshwater tanks. So without enough ASAs, the entire system just collapses into chaos.
And because they don't have enough of these ASAs to meet the soaring demand, things got very complicated and very tense very quickly. And we're going to break down the legal conflict that erupted over this impartially, relying strictly on the facts laid out in the research because there are very valid, very heated arguments on both sides here.
Oh, absolutely.
The expert source details a law known as Decree Law number 102B 2020, specifically Article 50A. This was a regulation amended in 2021, and it strictly prohibits motorhomes from staying overnight outside of designated ASAs or official campsites.
And the financial penalties designed to enforce this are significant. If you are caught simply sleeping in your van outside of these designated areas, the fines range from 60 to 300 euros.
That hurts.
Yeah, and if you were caught overnighting in protected natural areas like the Natura 2000 network, which are highly fragile, European Union designated ecological zones meant to protect vulnerable species and habitats, those fines actually double, going up to 600 euros.
Wow. So on one side of this conflict, you have the caravanists. According to the source, their perspective is that this law fundamentally destroys the very essence of the activity.
Because the whole point is the freedom to explore off the beaten path.
Right. They argue they are driving entirely self-sufficient vehicles, yet they are being forced into expensive, crowded, and often poorly equipped traditional campsites that are designed for tents, not large vans. It really feels to them like they are being criminalized just for a lifestyle choice.
But you have to look at the other side of the equation, which involves the local municipalities and the permanent residents. The research specifically points to coastal areas like the Southwest Alentejo, the Costa Vicentina Natural Park, and the Algarve.
Yeah.
These communities are dealing with severe unmanaged crowding. You have these massive 3-ton vehicles blocking narrow historic village streets that were built for horses, not motorhomes.
That sounds like a nightmare for traffic.
It is. And most critically, you have people arriving in unequipped vans, like the ones without built-in toilets. and they are leaving human waste and toilet paper scattered across protected natural landscapes, simply because there are no public facilities available.
So it becomes an environmental and logistical nightmare for the locals. They see their pristine ocean cliffs turning into open-air parking lots and, frankly, latrines. The roads are degrading, the trash cans are overflowing, and they aren't even seeing the economic benefit because these travelers aren't staying in their hotels.
Exactly.
So out of desperation, the government stepped in with a blanket ban on wild camping to just try and stop the bleeding.
This raises an important question, though. How can a country harness a massive decentralized economic boom without letting it destroy the very natural beauty that attracts the tourists in the first place?
It's tough balance.
The researchers conclude that because of this organizational failure, this severe lack of infrastructure clashing with strict prohibitive laws, caravanism currently only provides a temporary competitive advantage for Portugal.
Temporary because human behavior dictates that people will just stop coming if they feel unwelcome or, if they keep getting hit with €300 fines every time they try to watch a sunset.
Right, the market will correct itself. If caravanists continuously face heavy fines, hostility from locals, and a frustrating lack of basic service infrastructure, they will simply turn the steering wheel.
They'll just go somewhere else.
They will drive their homes to countries that have actively organized to welcome them, like neighboring Spain or France, where those ASAs are far more common. And if that happens, Portugal will lose out on the economic benefit entirely, and the rural interior will remain underfunded.
So to turn this temporary advantage into a sustainable long-term one, the focus really has to shift from merely tolerating these vehicles or outright banning them out of frustration to actively planning for them.
Yes.
And this leads us directly into the ultimate goal outlined by the researchers in this chapter: regenerative tourism.
And that is a crucial conceptual shift in how we think about travel. For a long time, the gold standard in the industry was sustainable tourism.
Right.
Sustainability is basically about doing no harm, right? Keeping things exactly as they are. You leave zero footprint, you take nothing but photographs.
Yeah.
But regenerative tourism goes a vital step further.
How so?
It is about actively restoring, healing, and revitalizing the destination. It's the philosophy of leaving the place tangibly better than you found it.
Think about that for a second. If you are listening to this right now and you are someone who loves to travel, you probably want to do it without destroying the local ecosystem. You want your presence to be a positive force.
Exactly.
But how does that actually work in practice when you're driving a massive machine? Well, the researchers suggest a highly practical, actionable solution that shifts the dynamic entirely. Instead of playing this endless game of whack-a-mole with police handing out fines, the government and local municipalities need to proactively build more ASAs, those service areas, and charge reasonable managed fees for them.
This study actually suggests implementing fees in the range of 5 to 10 euros a day for access to these municipal services. And this would be coupled with strict time limits on how long a van can stay in one spot.
Okay, so you can't just move in.
Right. Usually this is capped at 48 to 72 hours to ensure turnover and prevent permanent encampments.
It seems like such a simple, almost bureaucratic fix, but the ripple effects are massive for the whole country. Let's trace it out. First, it completely solves the environmental waste problem.
Yes.
Because if people have a cheap, accessible, legal place to dump their sewage, they aren't going to do it illegally in a national park. Second, that 5 to 10 euro fee provides a direct, brand new stream of revenue for small rural municipalities that desperately need funding to pave their roads or, support local schools.
And third, by systematically funneling the vans into designated managed areas slightly inland, you keep the fragile coastal cliffs clear of heavy vehicles. This physically allows nature the space and time to regenerate its flora and fauna, fulfilling that goal of regenerative tourism.
That's amazing.
You aren't just stopping the damage, you are funding the healing process.
It totally turns a burden into an asset.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, by implementing these relatively straightforward structural and legal changes, Portugal can take that 21.1 billion euros of tourism revenue we talked about at the beginning, and they can finally distribute it more evenly across the entire map.
Right.
It combats the heavy summer seasonality because caravanists travel year-round to chase the mild weather, and it directly fights regional economic inequality by bringing fresh money to the struggling interior.
So what does this all mean? When we look past the carefully curated aesthetic of the hashtag van life, The data shows that caravanism is an incredibly cost-effective, highly autonomous way to travel that fundamentally changes how tourists interact with geography.
Felt really good.
It genuinely has the potential to revitalize rural, off-the-beaten-path areas that traditional hotels will just never reach. But that incredible potential can only be unlocked if governments and municipalities step up to build the infrastructure necessary to channel that wanderlust responsibly.
Yeah, if they just ban it out of frustration because it's difficult to manage, everybody loses.
Totally. The tourists lose their freedom to explore, and the local communities lose a massive, sustainable economic opportunity.
It requires a paradigm shift from reactive, punitive legislation to proactive, welcoming organization. The demand for this lifestyle is already there. I mean, the vehicles are already on the road.
Right.
It is simply waiting to be managed in a way that benefits both the traveler and the host community.
It really makes you rethink what the future of human movement looks like. And that actually brings up a thought I want to leave you with today. We've talked a lot about this through the lens of tourism, but the line between traveling for vacation and traveling as a permanent lifestyle is blurring rapidly.
Well, for sure.
If the remote work revolution continues and these self-sufficient houses on wheels become the primary way an entire generation chooses to live, how will our traditional concepts of city planning, local taxes, and even national citizenship have to adapt to a population that can simply turn the ignition and move their living room to another time zone whenever they want?
It's a huge question.
It's definitely something to think about the next time you see a van rolling down the highway. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the research, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.